Oh, I thought you already went. Oh, okay. Off. But I've known that for a long time. I'm always starting.
Okay. Let's share. There we
Are
go.
you ready? Oh, for you. Okay.
Okay, good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. Call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 10th. We'll start by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we will wait for the color guard. Okay, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, may be seated. Thank you very much. I think Colonel James for that outstanding initial start to our meeting. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Dr. Finch, any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda. I believe someone will make a motion to excuse Mr. Jager.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to excuse Mr. Jager should be online. I think he said he was going to attend via Zoom. Is Mr. Jager online or via Zoom?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay.
I stand corrected. And welcome, Mr. Jager. Glad to have you online.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to communications.
Okay, we have a response to public comment. So during the public comment section at our last board meeting on April 26, community member had a question regarding instruction of sexual health learning standards. And then there were numerous comments regarding the importance of families as a primary stakeholder in their child's education. So first, response to public comment on sexual health standards. The West Valley School District does not instruct students in grades K through 4 regarding gender identity. Sexual health instruction in West Valley begins in grade 5, growing up awareness. It's a growing up awareness unit that we teach. So that's in line with our state law for sexual health, where we can begin in grade 5, and that's what we do. Response to public comment, families as primary stakeholder in their child's education. So numerous community members shared information about a proposed resolution regarding parents as a primary stakeholder in their child's education. In addition, information was shared about a proclamation that was passed by the City Council of Yakima. The City Council passed a proclamation on February 15th of 2022 to designate February as National Parent Leadership Month. West Valley School District Administration has recommended to the Board of Directors that District Policy 4129 should be revised to include the concept that was promoted by our community members at the school board meeting. Proposed revision is, it is the policy of the Board of Directors to encourage and support family involvement in education at home, in our schools and communities, and in school governance. The board recognizes the diversity of family structures, circumstances, and cultural backgrounds, and respects families as important decision makers and primary stakeholders for their child's education. Administration has recommended this policy revision rather than a proclamation because district policy will be accessible to future administrators and board members. So we'll put, recommending, and we have that for first reading in the agenda, recommending that we put that right into policy rather than a proclamation. Proclamation might get lost over time, but to put it in policy, it will be there for future administrators and future board members. And that's the complete response to public comment. Next, we have staff retirement recognition. So I'd like to go ahead and have the 4 staff members come on down. We have Lori Alderman, John Beck, Gail Buchanan, Cynthia Lacey. We have a nice plaque here for you. Come on down. And then, according to our records, I'll share, but as I read your name, you come in, the board can give you a handshake. So first would be Cindy Lacey with 22 years with the district. So congratulations, Cindy. Cynthia. Cynthia Lacey.
Thank you very much.
All right, next we have a tie. So both go first. Gail Buchanan, 33 years with the district. Gail Buchanan.
Thank you.
Then all 33 years with the district is Lori Alderman. Lori Alderman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
And it looks like John's not with us this evening, but, oh, he is. Oh, he's around the corner. Sorry about that. Excellent. I'm so glad he's here because he gets the award 40 years with the West Valley School District. John Beck.
Thank you.
Well, that's just wonderful. So easy, quick math. That's over 100 years total. It's close to 150 for the West Valley School District. So let's give them all a hand. That's wonderful.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 6, school program presentation, high school. Mr. President, Principal. Sorry.
All right, so Ben's going to start off, and then we're going to highlight our JROTC program. So appreciate the color guard, but we're going to have more information about that. So Ben, go ahead and take it away.
Well, first, I want to say congratulations, John Beck, one of my coaches and in the district. So it's fantastic to see you go through. Thank you very much for your service. It's been phenomenal. So thanks, John. Appreciate that. I wanted to just reiterate a couple of themes we have at West Valley High School. So the first one is our core belief. We've had this for the last year. We developed this through COVID, and then we actually instilled it last school year. And so our core belief at West Valley High School is that we do what's best for kids. We try to keep it simple. We try to keep it good. And that's what we try to base every single decision we have on. So every time we meet as a LIT, as a department team, as any kind of a group that we've got to make decisions, we remember that. We talk about that. We bring that back to the forefront. Is this best for kids? Because it's going to cost money and take a lot of time and have a lot of effort. It doesn't really matter. We're here for kids, and that's what we really want to focus on. So that's really our main core belief. Under that, I also wanted to reiterate our core values. I did want to quiz the school board to put you guys on the spot a little bit with our core values. We have 4 of them, and they do go with our acronym RAMS. So our R core value, does anybody on the board know our R core value? Mr. Thorne?
Respect.
Oh, it
Responsibility.
was.
Responsibility?
No,
Oh, darn.
it was respect. So when we first developed our core values, it was totally respect. We decided to alter that. Does anybody remember what we altered it to? I should call on our students that are in the audience, but I won't. It's relationships. So we've been very focused on relationships in our building, and that's mostly with our RAM Strong curriculum. We try to focus on relationships. All of our teachers try to focus on relationships, but we really take it to heart in our RAM Strong classes. The A in our core values, does anybody, A could be? Now nobody wants to guess.
Accountability.
Accountability, thank you. You redeemed yourself. So accountability is our second core value. M stands for what? Mr. Strong? No? Dr. Finch?
It was my phone. It was. Let me get my mic there. It was mindfulness.
It is, yes.
Hey.
Nice caveat. Yes, it was mindfulness. It is mindfulness still. So just being mindful where you're at in the present moment and how that looks to be a West Valley RAM. That's kind of what we focus on with mindfulness. The last one is service. And that's the S. You probably knew that, and I just took it away from you. Sorry to take the glory away, but Our last one is service. The reason I bring our core values up is because we try to instill that in everything we do in all of our classes. And not only that, but when I'm introducing the next program that we have at the high school, I can't think of another program that does this as consistently as our JROTC program at West Valley High School. They literally are extraordinarily relational. They're all very tight, like a family. The accountability piece is there. They have their own disciplinary board. They're extraordinarily mindful when it comes to where they're at and what they are showing other people as far as West Valley RAM. And the amount of service these kids do and these teachers do is amazing. They are out in the community constantly doing things just like you saw, doing the color guard everywhere they can, whether it's a ceremony for a funeral or just whatever happens in the community. They call us so that our kids can go do that because we do such a professional job of it that they want our service. And they always are there. We never have a problem getting enough kids there to be there. And it's just great to see the amount of dedication and responsibility that our students take and also our instructors. They're phenomenal. So as I introduce them, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that our core values, this is the epitome of any program that we have at West Valley High School and the core values that they show. So please give Colonel James a round of applause as he comes up.
Well,
I'm gonna introduce two young ladies right here while we're waiting for the slideshow. So, and when I get to course, sometimes I can talk for a while, but you need to know that, the former battalion commander, Colonel 42, is that right? And, Madam O'Shea, she just was the outgoing commander. We had a change of command ceremony right here. She headed off to the executive officer, Bailey Delozier, so she's Colonel 43, and it's a great relationship as far as how they're able to sustain everything at the time and what we do. And Ben O'Shea's going to become the brigade commander for spring camp coming up. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So she'll be in charge of almost 200 cadets from Washington and Oregon down at Camp Ilea in Oregon on the Oregon coast and seaside. In between Astoria and Seaside. So she's got some responsibility there. So, and then Bailey Delozier is got a long family history. Both of them do actually. Both her brothers were in the battalion as well, and served most of the military. So with that, I'd like to have Bailey brief our year in review.
thank you, sir. So as Colonel mentioned, I'm Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Bailey Delozier, and I'm the West Valley High School Ram Battalion Commander for the 2022-2023 school year. So earlier this evening, we had a tour of our indoor range, and some of our cadets were shooting. And we also did a color guard of the ceremony. And our brief will cover our 2022 school year, our future plans, JCLC, scholarships, and keys to success. So this year, we've done many events, but some notable things that we've done are several home game color guards, our Veterans Stand Down, which is a volunteering event at the Sun Dome in October, our Veterans Day Assembly and the parade, a North Salem High School virtual drill meet, and we did a drill camp that month as well, our home drill meet here, a Kennewick drill meet, which was the first away drill meet that we've done in 2 years, and our East Valley drill meet, which was the championships where one of our very own cadets took first place in marksmanship. And then last month, we also did an award ceremony, our military change of command. So our mission in JROTC is to motivate young people to be better citizens. And along with that, we focus on the 7 Army values, which is an acronym called leadership, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and perseverance. Personal courage, I'm sorry. And some benefits of JROTC are advanced pay and rank if you enlist, senior ROTC college scholarship opportunities, real world skills like public speaking. And JCLC is our Junior Cadet Leadership Challenge in Camp Riley, Oregon. It is actually coming up next week, 18 through 22 May. It is a rigorous 5-day event at Camp Oregon with various PT-related exercises. And our brigade commander this year is Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Madison O'Shea, and I would like to pass it off to her to talk about this event.
JCLC is what we would call our accumulated. It's what we train all year to be able to do. We take the skills that we learn in class and outside of it, and then we learn many, many more. So when we go there, we're going to learn archery. We're going to learn land navigation and medical training. And as you can see, the rest of the events up on the board. But our cadets will also get the opportunity to be in leadership positions. So they will learn new staff positions, or they will be a company commander or first sergeant where they will learn how to lead other students. And this is a great opportunity for us because this is the first time we will be going in 3 years. So none of the cadets currently in the program have ever been, including myself. And hopefully it'll be a very great year where we get to work with the other schools and learn a lot of new skills.
So next we'll move into scholarships. This year, our 7 graduates will have earned nearly $317,000 scholarships together, increasing our total to $3.1 million in the last 7 years. And one of our cadets received 100% tuition assistance, as well as a $20,000 signing bonus through the Oregon National Guard. And some scholarships that you are eligible for through ROTC are CMP, which is Civilian Marksmanship Program scholarships. It's $1,000 per person. College ROTC, which is $100,000. Our GI Bill, which is $72,000, and our Dollars for Scholars scholarship, which is 2 $1,000 scholarships. Our program is student-led with numerous opportunities, including cyber competitions, academic competitions, leadership competitions, team building exercises, and physical challenges, and many more. And with our program comes credit equivalency, which not many people know about. So you can get occupational ed credits, PE credits, art credits, history, and health. And so that's all I have, but now I would like to call on Maddie again to give a cadet testimony of what JROTC has done for her.
I joined this program 3 years ago as a sophomore. And while I would say I was a well-rounded student, there were so many more things I could learn. I thought the only thing important were academics. And if I didn't ace every test, then what was the point of coming to school? And yet coming into JROTC, I learned that there are so many more important things, that of reading another book on the weekend, which while was very enjoyable, I could be out serving my community. JROTC not only teaches people how to follow, but also how to lead and how to be a better citizen. And while people assume that if you go into JROTC, you have to go into the military, that is not true. I will be going off to college this year and will very likely never join the military, but this program has welcomed me and taught me so much. And I know my other seniors and even the juniors and underclassmen would agree that this program teaches you how to step up and be a better leader. Because when there's an issue, we don't go to colonel or master sergeant. Most of the cadets, they will come to Bailey or they will come to I, and we will solve it. And if we can't solve it, then we step up and find an adult. But in most circumstances, I have the answer because I've learned the skills, and the people who came before me taught me the skills that I didn't know I needed. And not only do we serve our community, but we hold the standard that the academic competitions and the sports competitions hold, where you have to have a C- or above. So we've had several times where instead of practicing, we cadets sit down and they are doing their homework. They're sitting over there nodding. And we like to say that we make a scholar, a leader, and an athlete, so that our cadets are well-rounded, and when they go out into the world, they have all the opportunities. That's all I have to say on this, but if you have any questions that myself or Bailey could answer, we will be taking those now.
So any questions from the school board? Well, we really appreciate the presentation. It's just outstanding. Love the focus on service, just like Mr. McMurray said, the S in RAMS is service, and that's what you're showing and being a leader on every day that you are participating in JROTC and all the things that you do after school and on the weekends. You're really representing West Valley in such a high regard. We really appreciate all that you do. So,
Thank you, sir.
all right. So that's our program for this evening. Thank you, Mr. McMurray. Thank you, Colonel James, and thank you to our students.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Finch. We'll go ahead and move on to public comment of non-discussion agenda items. Just a couple of points again. The board will not comment, but we will listen. We do have our staff attorney, our district attorney for the school district, Jason McKay here. So want to acknowledge him here so that he can help with any responses of anything that may come up regarding some legal issues concerning any topics you may bring up. So with that, do we have a list of individuals that have signed up for comment? Okay, we have a fair list, so we'll allow 3 minutes per person. We'll start with 30 minutes. If we need a little bit more time, we will allow a little bit more time, and that's not including anyone who may have comments via Zoom. So we'll go ahead and start with the first person on the list. Is it Bea Morris? Or Baylor Morris? Bea?
I am a concerned student of the West Valley School District. This new policy makes me feel unsafe using the bathrooms. I believe that God made you the gender you are and DNA cannot be changed. Kids like me have been through enough the past 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to alternate here. Is there anyone via Zoom who would like to make a public comment? All right, thank you. Then we'll move to the next person on the list. Don Kirby?
So I've got two comments and one question. Understand the board can't answer the questions, but I'll posit it anyhow. Obviously, coming to the meeting tonight to discuss this first reading with regard to the restroom accessibility and the locker room accessibility. I look at this and I think, the accommodation of some just can't justify a policy that disadvantages another group of students. I don't see that. I'm reading into the draft language here. I understand that basically it states that any student, regardless of gender identity, may use a private restroom, or the school will provide accommodations needed to allow the student to keep their gender status private. My question to you is really from the standpoint of looking to, I guess, for a better thought here, sacrifice the many for the good of the few. And what are you going to do with, more accommodations for the other students? I recognize that this is a RCW that's been in place for I believe since 2019. The RCW reads that by, I believe, January 31, all districts will have to implement some sort of a policy. I understand, where the school board is. I've got a question as to why it's taken so long for the board to address this subject, given the fact that this should have been done by 2020. I can only posit a couple, I guess, theories here with regards to bonds and levies, but I'll save that for the other. But my question to you is, what do you do to accommodate the other students? And I realize we're talking about marginalization versus, for the good of anybody. And what I see is a real slippery slope, you guys. I really do. You're going to demarginalize one class, but yet you're going to then marginalize the other. And I think it opens it up for a lot of litigation against the district as far as how that's going to work. And so my question is, are we going to be looking then to look at private locker rooms and private restrooms as opposed to a single dressing room or a private restroom? I mean, if you have 30 kids that feel uncomfortable, are you going to have 30 different private restrooms and private locker rooms? So that's the question that I've got, or the comment with regard to this policy. And I'm sure I'll probably have more when we get done here. The question I have, or the comment, you mentioned that you're not teaching sex education, it does not instruct students like in grades K through 4 regarding gender identity. I believe that's what the response is. I got it. I understand instruction. But my question is, why are we putting books in the elementary libraries that basically discuss transgender ideas? Okay. So you got 2 books right now that I see, which is, I just did a real quick research on your Destiny library search. It's a great deal. I really liked it, but I found 2 books, When Aiden Becomes a Brother at High of Jazz, that are in your K4 libraries. So I guess that's the question we have. The board to address that particular issue, in fact, you're not instructing or teaching.
All right.
Those are the comments we got.
Okay, thank you. Just asking. Okay, next I'll check again to see if there's any comment via Zoom. All right, next we have Leslie, is it Carmen or Cameron? I'm sorry.
I think this gentleman pretty much said it all, except I have a 3rd grade granddaughter. And when she gets into high school or even junior high, I don't want her in a locker room with a boy. That has boy parts, and we're trying to protect these kids. And that's what she's going to see, participates in sports. And I just think that's wrong. And it's just wrong. They shouldn't have to see what their parents don't want them to see at that age. They should have, we as parents and grandparents should have a choice. So are we going to have a choice? It's the choice to not participate in sports. I just think it's wrong.
Thank you. Again, I will check. Do you have any comments? We do have one. Okay, thank you. Can you hear us? I'm sorry, can you unmute, please? Maybe you're on mute. We can hear you. Go
Sí,
ahead.
pues estaba escuchando el comentario de la señora que pasó
Okay. Do we have somebody
antes
who
de
can
mí
interpret Spanish? Okay.
y nosotros, pues estoy de acuerdo con ella. Nosotros somos una familia pues cristiana y nosotros estamos inculcándole a nuestros hijos nuestros valores y el plan original de Dios, ¿verdad? Un hombre, una mujer. Entonces, sí.
Translate what she said. She's talking about educating her children within her religion, and in her religion, there are boys and there are girls. Continúa, Marta.
Y también no me gustaría que mis hijos, como la señora anterior dijo, que pues que sus hijos estuvieran mi hija estuviera con un niño en un locker y ella estarse cambiando.
The person said that I wouldn't want to have my daughter in a locker room with a boy. Sí, continúa.
Pero también nosotros estamos inculcando el respeto para,
But we're also
para
teaching
los
respect
demás.
for everybody.
No discriminamos,
We're not
nosotros no somos
discriminating.
homofóbicos,
We're
nosotros
not
respetamos
homophobic. We are respecting
la libre expresión de cada individuo.
the freedom to express the expression for everybody to express themselves the way they want.
Pero sí me preocupa un poquito el tema.
But I'm really concerned about this topic.
Gracias.
Thank you.
¿Cómo se llama usted?
Marta
Sí.
Goodrich.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the next person on our list, Chad Wallace, I think.
Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. This is my first school board meeting. But I was looking through your, on the air a second ago, your mission statement. And I also listened to the RAMs and what that stands for. And I'm just curious how gender inclusive schools, whatever it is, jives with those. Seems to me that it's actually the antithesis of those things. We're not actually promoting safety. We're actually introducing potential harm. I'm the father of 4 girls. I'm a very protective father. This troubles me a great deal. We've seen in Virginia, bad things happen because of this very thing, this very issue. And it seems like this policy and this decision has gone to the extreme of the opposite. So instead of making a very small percentage of people that this applies to, instead of making exceptions for them, seems to be the opposite. And we're making the large majority make concessions and potentially put themselves in harm's way to implement this. So it's about all I get to say, but I would like to know at some point how the mission statement and the RAMs, my words aren't there for that, but how this actual policy meshes with those goals and those standards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, we'll check to see if we have anyone else via Zoom. We do have another comment there. Okay. I would ask this time, if you are on Zoom or participating, please make sure to unmute your phone or communication device so we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, who are you calling on?
You may have to speak a little louder.
Who are you calling on?
Sorry, we still can't hear you. If you can hear us, either talk louder or make sure you're not muted or your volume is low on your device.
Are you calling on me? Hello, are you calling on me?
There you go. We can
Thank
hear
you.
you now.
There we go. My name is Kate, and I do have a question that I think is looming in the back of everyone's mind, and I'm hoping you can answer it at the next board meeting. Of the very few population, there's less than 0.5% of people that are actually transgender, and even less of them that are physically going through some sort of change. So the opportunities in our locker rooms for someone that is truly changing their gender between the ages of 14 and 18 years old is incredibly low. It might be happening here and there, but it's incredibly low. The bigger question here, in my opinion, is how do you keep out kids that just want to identify for the day or the week as the opposite sex so that they can mess around in the locker rooms, of which there are incidences happening right now? I think that's what most of the parents want to know, is how are you going to keep that line very fixed?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next we'll take someone here in the room. Is this Kent or Keith?
Sorry, Mr. Strong, I took that as an attendance list.
Okay. If you would like to speak, this is your opportunity. If not, I'll move on. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Marinacci.
Good evening. Taking a cue from a community member's request from last board meeting, I'd like to request that as the general policy is to be voted in the coming weeks, that prior to a decision that each board member state their position and their reasoning behind their vote. While we understand, has been shared by the school district's attorney, that there's no avoidance of this district of such a policy, a response only noting that our hand is forced is not adequate. On this topic, given the certainty that the vast majority of parents and community members are not in support of what state is mandating, it's critical that each board member publicly state their position, including their reasoning. However, I do not believe the board's work stops there. In that, by and large, the board is not in support of the state's mandate. I'd like to see the board or individual members formally contact WVSD, OSPI, the governor's office, along with our state representatives, and outline the challenge the state has presented to the school board and the community. A simple statement that indicates while The West Valley School District supports all students being treated equally with respect. The mandated state gender policy, as recommended by WASDA, puts the district at odds with the values of the community and is not inclusive to those who disagree. Furthermore, enforcement can place students and staff members into muffling their free speech or coercion to follow certain rules, or cause a lack of enforcement of safety in the case of a student claiming to be in another gender who has nefarious aims, raising the possibility of an assault or lawsuits. Furthermore, without any funding, students are now placed in an unsafe situation in the current bathroom and locker room setup, forced to come up with alternatives that are not easily rectified in the short term. Now, with respect to the short-term and longer-term solutions on the bathroom and locker room, while the district has only recently communicated more broadly the availability of a private bathroom, and the gender policy draft has called this out, I think the district can do more. Can we not post outside existing bathrooms and locker rooms at the high school, junior high, and middle school a simple notice for all students to know that a private bathroom is available upon request, perhaps including instructions to the nearest private bathroom? Such notification could go out to all parents district-wide, so all are aware of the availability. For the longer term, as you all know, research has been previously presented to this board to look at the bathroom design of individual lockable stalls which opened up to an open area. I recommend the board strongly investigate the solution. While the cost will be high, if done right, it can go a long way to alleviate many of the safety concerns, not only of assaults, however, the likelihood of any other nefarious activities such as drugs as well. This is an opportunity to treat all students equally and have their own secure stall. All students will have access, so it will be inclusive. This can be a win-win for all given the circumstances. Another suggestion for the gender policy is include a provision that no school district employee shall actively influence or encourage a student to consider changing their gender identity should be their own. Now we have this sort of promotion by school. Decisions at the local school district be left and not completed by local entities that can cross that OSPI, however they are covered in this regard. While such an approach may fall on deaf ears, everyone just gets out. We might as well get rid of the local school boards.
All right, thank you, Mr. Marinacci. Do we have anyone else that would like to comment via Zoom?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. My name is Tara Kobia, and I'm just following up with what Mr. Marinacci just presented. And I guess just putting it out there that as I've talked to several of you on the board about the possibility of implementing these all-inclusive bathrooms that would create a safe space for every student, regardless of regardless of their gender identity. The biggest way that in this presentation that I have presented to those of you on the board, you've seen that the research has been done and that it's out there. And I just wanted to add my voice to echo that we do have a solution that's available, and it does come with a cost, but a cost that in my opinion is worth the expense because it involves the safety of our students. And if that truly is a concern for our administration and the teachers and our school board, then this should be a top priority. And knowing that that cost has to come from somewhere. I mean, or the payment, that money has to come from somewhere. And we have that coming up. You guys did a fantastic job of coming in under budget on these two elementary schools. And although I know there are other needs in the district with the junior high and updating and making things more technologically where they need to be, I believe that it is worth every penny that it is required to use some of that excess funding, consider using that and having the support of, I believe, listening to the other community members who have shared their voice and their concerns, I don't know that that would be a problem. I think we would have that community support. And so I encourage other community members who would be willing to see that excess funding go towards this, creating these all-inclusive bathrooms. We have local architectural firms in the state who have done this in other schools. They've seen, we've got evidence of the success of creating these all-inclusive spaces where every student, every bathroom includes individual stalls, floor to ceiling, side to, front to back, a separate door with a lock that creates a safe space for every single student. And it will come with a cost, but I think that the more community members voice their support of putting potentially this excess funding that we have coming at us, that I think you as a board will see that is worth, that's where we want that money to go. I think this is a major concern. We've seen the research and we can make it happen, but we can't do it without that funding. So I encourage all community members, whether you are listening in or present, to show your support, that we would like that money to go towards making these changes so that we can ensure a safe space for our students. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next, we'll take a live person in the audience. Mr. Borden, would you like to come up to the podium?
I raised concern at the last school board meeting and expressed about on gender identity K-4 in our classroom curriculum. I didn't realize until I came tonight that you made a position statement that our district is not teaching gender identity in the curriculum in K-4. But I had asked for each one of your positions on this because it's important to me to begin to realize where each of you stand on this issue and lots of other issues so that I can support and rally people to vote for a board member that identifies with my feelings and positions and conservatism. You know, you state that it may not be in the curriculum, gender identity, but there may not be a curriculum through sex education in K-4 that instructs on gender identity. But if there are books in the library and books read in the classroom that deal with gender identity, or questions on a test of social, emotional learning, etc., it will be introduced to children by the whim of each individual teacher. I'm concerned what is in the library. Last fall, we had a meeting, a school board meeting in the library, and I went to one of the first book stands that I came to and grabbed a book and started reading it. And I could not believe what was in that book, and encouragement to be gay and all the foul language that was in the book. I could not believe it was in our school library. So we need to be very sensitive about the reading material that's provided in the library and for the students in their classroom. I guess I only, when I asked for each one of your positions, I only received 2 emails back out of the 5 board members. And I would like to hear from the other 3 of you that didn't respond, so I know where you stand on these issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Again, if there's anyone else via Zoom. So it sounds like we do have another person that would like to comment via Zoom. Again, a reminder, if you have your device on mute, to please unmute it so that we can hear you.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Megan Mock, and I just came to deliver some bad news and some good news. The bad news is that we don't have public schools anymore. They're gone. We have government schools now. This board and the school district administration are simply slaves to the union and the lawmakers of Washington. We saw this in the last month's board meeting with the lawyer. You guys have no control over anything. You are literally slaves. You just simply have to pull your kids. This is to the families. You just simply have to pull your kids out of this school. It is going to get much worse before it gets better. And by get much worse, I'm talking about what Ashlyn talked about at the last meeting. I'm talking about Mr. Critchlow's report, and I'm talking about Mr. Connolly's terrible idea of pulling pay to play. Things are just going to get worse. The good news is that we can turn this ship around. There are many other options in the community that you can afford. There's lots of support from private programs. Search it out, you won't regret it. I pulled mine out in October of 2020, my children, and they are so much better. The other good news is that the good teachers that are left in this district can also return West Valley School District back into a public school. They must opt out of the union. Optouttoday.com. You have to leave the WEA. They are your money that you're paying to WEA is funding these kinds of policies and these laws, which are completely castrating this board and the administration. So please, teachers, if you don't believe in this kind of policy, optouttoday.com. There are many other good options, please. The WEA only spends about 8% of its revenue for teachers and students. The rest of your money is going to radical leftists. So please opt out today. Good teachers have got to stop funding this stuff. If you don't opt out, you're participating in the grooming of this generation. And Matthew 18:6 says, if anyone causes one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around your neck and be dropped into the depths of the sea. Please opt out today. Pull your kids out.
All right, thank you for your comment. We have another person that would like to speak. Shauna Lewis.
Hello. So I've got two girls in the district, and I'm going to reiterate clearly what the majority of people feel. I'm going to say gender inclusive. To me, that means you respect everyone. By allowing transgender men that identify as women use the same restroom, locker room, and play on the same team as my daughter does not respect my daughter. Vice versa, the opposite sex. What you as a school have done by saying, if my child does not feel safe or feels uncomfortable with you allowing a student that has a penis in the girls' restroom and the locker room, then my student has to use the staff restroom. You talk about discrimination, but please tell me, how are you not discriminating upon my child? It is absolutely unacceptable for you to tell my student to use an alternative restroom and for you to force them to use the same restroom as to those who choose to identify as something else than what they were born with. There is a better solution. Make another restroom. An individual restroom for those that choose to identify as something else rather than what born as. Sports, let's talk about that. In no way should a male that now identifies as a woman be allowed to compete with the girls. Their bodies are naturally stronger, their muscle structures are different, and a boy is just genetically built different than a woman, hormones or not. If you want to include everyone, create a division for those students, but don't create an unfair environment for students who want to compete against the sex what they were born as. That is not respecting those students. So please tell me how all students are being respected. It seems to me that you are allowing the minority to write the narrative for the majority.
Again, thank you for your comments. One last, we have anyone else via Zoom? It looks like we have one person. Again, a request to make sure your phone or device is unmuted so we can hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks. So we can all agree that ending unjust discrimination and ensuring that all students are treated with respect are important and admirable goals. However, there's nothing discriminatory about seeking to protect children from confusion and harmful experiences. In fact, protecting our kids from such harms is a fundamental right and our duty as parents. This is rooted in the natural moral law and upheld by the U.S. Constitution. The district's proposed gender identity policy will compel speech, allow biological males to defeat biological females in sports, interfere with parental rights in education and healthcare, and most concerning, it will enable sexual harassment and assault. What limits are in place to prevent abuse of this newly protected class? As far as I can tell, a student will be able to change their gender identity on a week-to-week or even day-to-day basis. And staff members, let alone parents, have no recourse to challenge the validity of such claims. The current WIAA policy includes an appeal process. The state's model transgender student policy doesn't appear to prevent such a safeguard. The board should revise the policy to include some safeguards to prevent abuse. Further, this policy is contrary with the family involvement policy that you just discussed. School staff must not be prohibited from disclosing to parents any issue their child may have, and the district must not be allowed to encourage or otherwise facilitate a student's gender transition without parent or guardian consent. At the April 18th board meeting, I appreciated the board's members indicating that this process will hurt the district in the long run. I also acknowledge that legal counsel's responsibility is to protect the district from all risk. However, as a parent of 3 students in the district, a voter, a taxpayer, and a member of the community, I will fully support the board should you choose to go to bat for your constituents and take some risk. And I'm willing to bet I'm not alone in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for your comments. I'm just going to wrap up the public comment section. I will say just as a side note, I just want everyone to know how much we really value your input and your comments. They're extremely important. It's very valuable to us that you come to the meetings, that you share your perspective, share with us what you're really feeling. Some of us may feel the same way, and some of you have probably recognized that, but it's important for us to have your perspective so that we can come up with the best possible resolution given the circumstances we have to deal with. So with that, I want to thank you for your comments. Thank you for being here today, and please continue to come and share your comments. And even if it's offline, if you want to comment to any one of us individually, I'm sure that we'll be glad to take your comments. So thank you today for that. Okay, with that, I want to move on to action items. Dr. Finch, well, let's see, we have the approval of minutes, April 26th, the study session and the board meeting. So would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes, or do we want to take these all together? Can we should separate these, I would.
Yeah, I think, go ahead and separate them.
Okay.
It's not consent agenda.
So would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes? of April 26th?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the study session on April 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Thorner. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 26th study session meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item, approval of travel request. Again, we could take these together unless someone would like to pull one of these items out and
Well,
discuss them
just-
further.
I did want to note for the audience that in the board notes, I had noted that I superintendent had approved the May 2nd and 3rd trip to Wenatchee for the golf team. It turned out that it was and so it was basically of a timely nature where they needed that approval. It made sense, the request that they had to stay overnight rather than travel back and forth to Wenatchee on back-to-back night and then get back up there in the morning. It made sense to stay overnight. So I went ahead and approved that. Our board policy is to have board approval for overnight trips with students. And so we do want to have that formal board approval, but that's something that I had approved just on a very unusual situation.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Finch. If no any other items, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the travel request, items 1 through 4 on 8B of the agenda. With that, I'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I'm sorry, I did not get Mr. Jager's vote on that. So,
I said aye.
okay, thank you. So motion carries 5-0. Approval of WIAA membership renewal.
So both of these C and D relate to WIAA. This is an annual renewal, and the next one is our annual resolution.
All right. Anybody have any comments or discussion on wanting to pull any of those items out? If not, I'd appreciate if someone is willing to make a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Mokel. Okay, so is that for item C and D? That we have that motion?
Together.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries for items C and D on action items. Item E, approval of policy additions revisions, first reading. We have 3 items: gender inclusive schools, parent involvement, civility policy.
All right, we'll take each of these separately. So we do have Jason McKay. So Jason is the district's legal counsel. Jason can go ahead and go to the podium so in case we have any questions. Appreciate, Jason, you making the trip here to Yakima and being here available as a resource for us. Gender inclusive policy, appreciate the board's guidance on that. We wanted to have an opportunity for public to comment on this. And so we had a draft that was posted and we did have public comment that was collected and shared with the board. And again, just on the, how did we get to point? So quite a few years ago, WASDA had issued a discretionary policy about gender inclusive schools. When we checked into it, we were following the anti-discrimination policy that we have in place. Anti-discrimination did include gender identity and gender expression. And so at that point in time, we decided since it was discretionary, we would just continue with the anti-discrimination practices that we had in place. After that first discretionary policy, then that's when the legislature did pass the law, I believe it was in 2019, said that it was required to have a policy in place. So when that came across my desk as assistant superintendent, I did not look at it closely. I'm just full disclosure. I thought it was an update to the discretionary policy when I had seen the title of it. So when I thought it was an update to discretionary policy, then I figured, well, we're following the anti-discrimination, and this is an update to discretionary policy, and we don't necessarily have to enact that. So I apologize to everyone that I did not look at that closely. So then recently we've had a comment at the school board meetings about concerns about following the current practices and procedures that we have been following based on anti-discrimination. And then it was actually Ben McMurray had called my attention. He had been looking into this and said, well, Peter, we have to have, there's supposed to be this, look at this. This is RCW. We have to have this in place. So then my next call immediately was to our legal counsel. And and basically got educated that, yes, I had overlooked that and that this policy, legislature, RCW had passed that in 2019. We're supposed to have in 2020 a policy in place. So that's when I brought the attention of the board and into this policy development. So we did have a draft that I had worked with Mr. McKay here on, and we had posted that to the website. We did receive feedback, and so we did actually make a change from what was posted originally. So, and we have this for you tonight. So in the first draft of the policy and procedures, we did add a bullet under the first paragraph there under procedures. And that was to address comments actually that we've heard this evening, and then comments that were directed to me from the school board in looking at this first reading. And so we did add this, that the administrator will meet with the student. We added that third bullet to document the student's genuine and sincere declaration of gender identity and gender expression. And then that later was also referred to about the declaration. And so, that does address what we were having concerns where we had the written concerns that were to us and concerns the board had expressed and concerns we heard this evening about what happens if a student says, oh, today I'm a girl, I'm going to run into the girls' locker room or the girls' bathroom. So if that were to happen, that is a disciplinary action that would, the administration would take disciplinary action against that student because that student has not followed this policy and procedures. That student did not have a genuine and sincere declaration of their gender and gender expression. And it was pretty obvious they were saying they were girls, they could run into the girls' bathroom and cause a disruption there. And so any student that does that is going to be subject to discipline at any of our schools if it's not this genuine, sincere declaration of gender identity and gender expression. And so I just wanted to share with you that we did hear the comments. We did make a change into this first reading. So it does have that additional information there that was not on the draft that was on the website. And so again, it's on, so we have this little packet here. It's the gender inclusive schools. The first page is the policy. So the policy is what is required by that RCW. If you turn the page, then it says 3211P. So P means procedures. So gender inclusive schools is the next page. And it starts off, a student may initiate a conversation regarding their identity with any staff member, such as teacher or counselor. And then the point is that we want the staff member to assist the student to work with the administration. As I was working on these procedures with Mr. McKay, we were thinking through how would this really happen? Is the student going to immediately go to the administration? Probably the student, I think, goes to a counselor usually and discusses this with a counselor. But we want the counselor to school administration into the conversation so that the administration can meet with the student to develop understanding of their needs, develop an understanding of their day-to-day routine. And then we added this third bullet to document the student's genuine and sincere declaration of gender identity and gender expression. So that is where they work with the administration to declare their gender identity, gender expression, so that if a student doesn't do that, if they just run into the girls' bathroom, then that certainly is grounds for disciplinary action, that it needs to be sincere and genuine declaration. So does that answer your question there? I know we don't usually have public participation. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, so again, this is a meeting of the board. It's a meeting in public. It's not at this point the study session where we have question and answer and that type of thing. So I just wanted to help you follow where we were on that bullet.
However,
so
if I may interject, Dr.
Sure,
Finch,
sure.
at the end of the meeting, we will be taking additional public comment on agenda items where you can state your comments and concerns at that time. So it's a little bit of the impartial, or I'm sorry, the uncomfortable rather part of the school board meeting, in that it's just not this back and forth with the audience, but you will have an opportunity. I'm sorry, Dr. Finch, for interrupting, but you will have an opportunity to introduce additional public comment later in the meeting.
And I guess I just wanted to have a chance for Jason McKay here, our counsel, to to share again how he and I had worked through what the law has said and then what the WVSD policy said, so that we have something that, I believe is really something that we can use as our guidance for our procedures as we move forward. And then also something that does follow the law.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Finch and school board for again having me back. It's good to see everyone again. Yes, Dr. Finch is correct. We essentially started with the RCW that we've talked about before. And for those in the audience who haven't looked it up, as RCW 28A 642080. And that's the RCW, the law from the legislature that requires that the school district must have a policy and procedure on this issue that must incorporate. You don't have to adopt completely from top to bottom, but you have to at least incorporate the elements of WVSD's model policy and procedure. So what Dr. Finch and I did, we understood that the model policy and procedure was not something that was going to be palatable for the district. So what he and I attempted to do, at least for this stage, and of course we'll get input here and then come back for a second read, try to construct something that it's that delicate tap dance, constructing something that complies with the law and what the law says, and having the quote unquote elements of the WVSD policy and procedure, but also trying to incorporate a few other items that attempted as best as we could to address some of the concerns that he and I have both heard, either from the community, from board members, or from other staff. One of those bullet points, of course, being addressing this issue and it needing to be a genuine and sincere declaration from the student, because I think Dr. Finch and I totally and completely understood the concern that this would be abused by students and that students would essentially say, well, today I am going to be a male and then tomorrow I'll be female, and then flip flop back and forth. And that's obviously not the spirit or intent clearly of this policy, procedure, the RCWs, or any of the Washington Administrative Code that was adopted by the Human Rights Commission that tries to implement this rule. And so the school district is, of course, well within its to police it in a sense of it's not being overly aggressive with students who are making this declaration, but at the same time, just as with any other rules or policies or practices within the school district, to hold students to assure that they're being accountable and they're not abusing the system or being dishonest. And so that was one of the few just slight amendments that Dr. Finch and I made based on the feedback. But at this stage, again, of course, I'm always looking at this like I have to do in the lens of what does the law require? And so I'm always going to be looking at it from that lens to ensure, as several people have pointed out accurately tonight, it is my responsibility to you all is to ensure that you are doing what you need to do to stay compliant with the law.
And then Jason, there was a question I know from the board last time about supervision from staff, like a staff member supervising a locker room. And you and I had talked about, and just share, like, basically you said that it's really not something that you would put into this policy, because supervision is something that the staff member is doing, whether the student is, of the gender or has gender expression of that gender. Like basically there needs to be, I think, reasonable supervision at all times.
Staff, regardless of what the policy or procedure says or the gender identity of the student, that staff are being reasonable and they're being careful and they're ensuring that they're not doing anything that's going to be determined inappropriate. There's nothing under this policy and procedure and under the current state of the law, there's nothing inappropriate or illegal about a staff member being in a locker room with a student who identifies as that gender. Even if the student biologically isn't that gender, that's not something that is illegal or would be concerning to me from a liability standpoint. So staff, and of course, that may require some training for staff on how to handle that situation. But just like before, staff are going to be required to be reasonable and exercise care just as they've always had to do.
So I have a question. I think someone asked this at the last meeting, so just bear with me here if it's a silly question or a repeat question. So really, what happens if we don't follow the state requirement on this? I mean, what's the time frame? Are there other school districts that are kind of challenging this approach? I mean, what would happen to
So
us?
I guess I'd answer that question a couple different ways, because I think we have, as I talked about at the last meeting, where there were fewer people, so I got some new faces in here. But as we talked about it at the last meeting, there's really two things going on here. One of them is is what we're here talking about tonight, which is the legal requirement to develop a policy and a procedure. We're not here talking about the law in terms of discriminating, retaliating against those based on gender identity. That has been the state of the law since 2015, is when some of those statutes and regulations were adopted. And so ultimately, your liability is different depending on what you failed to do. If you fail to adopt a policy or procedure under the law, OSPI has statutory authority to take action, financial and otherwise, against the school district if they choose to do so. I am not aware of any other school districts that, I know that there are other school districts that are working on adopting their policies and procedures too. So you're certainly not the only ones. I'm not aware of any school districts that have openly decided just not to do it. So I don't have that information. The question of liability for failing to actually follow the law in terms of following these things that are in the procedure, in terms of, deliberate misuse of pronoun, not allowing a student to use the bathroom based on their chosen gender identity, locker rooms, some of the other things that have been discussed here. That is a totally different thing with much, much different liability. Failing to do that would subject the school district to complaints with our State Human Rights Commission, lawsuits, and probably, depending on the facts of the case, of course, potentially successful and financially devastating lawsuits to the school district for not following the law in terms of accommodations and discrimination. So it really depends on, two issues: following the law, as the school district has been doing, or developing the policy procedure, which of course is what we're all here to talk about.
Can you speak on what's going on in our surrounding districts in our area?
I don't know about your surrounding districts and what they're doing.
Yeah, I have checked and they have adopted the policy and they are implementing these procedures, very similar procedures.
If we take the advice of a community member to create single-use stalls, is that within the Washington state law?
Yes. Yes, you can do that. What the law ultimately, I guess I'd say, requires, or maybe more appropriately forbids, is forcing those of a gender identity to use a specific bathroom. So if you have a boys' bathroom and a girls' bathroom, and then you have a separate one, in this hypothetical, separate gender neutral single stall bathroom, compelling a student who doesn't want to use that single stall bathroom to use it would be a violation of the law. If, on the other hand, all you had were a bunch of single-use bathroom stalls, then it's not an issue. Ultimately, that all comes from the law. It's under the Washington Administrative Code interpreting the statute on access. As a public entity, you have to provide, you cannot discriminate in terms of access. And so if everyone's option is the same to use a single stall bathroom, then I would not have any concerns about violation of the law.
And timing issues as far as using the locker room, having a transition period where students are uncomfortable changing or whatever, being able to separate times like that, is that lawful?
I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure I understand.
If we have 5 minutes at the start of class for students who are to change during that time, and then after those students change, those who are not come in to change, is that lawful?
I might have to look into that one a little bit more. I think, again,
because I'm reading in here that there could be a timing issue.
Right, Jason, I think that was to provide privacy, if a student wanted privacy, to have, it said, separate changing schedule So utilizing the locker room before or after other students. That
Right,
was
so
one-
yes, I guess if what you're doing is you're allowing those students who are not comfortable in being in the locker room at that time to do it to change at a later time, immediately after the other students are changing, that's perfectly appropriate. If that's what you're asking.
I guess I'm trying to navigate segregation, maybe, that we're segregating groups of kids.
Think I would be concerned, here's how I would put it. I would be concerned if what the school district is doing is say all those who identify as transgender must use the locker rooms in this 5-minute period, and then everybody else gets to come in afterwards. I would be concerned about that policy. But that's something that we'd probably want to work with the district on options on how to handle that practically, because I think that's one of those things, as is some of this, that there's a spectrum of actions to take, and there's the middle. And so I'm happy to work with the district to try to figure out options to practically be able to address the issue.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Jager.
You can hear me?
Yes.
First of all, I'm not there tonight because I have COVID, and so I didn't want to infect everybody, so that's why I'm home. I have heard several times and that we were okay because we provide at the high school a separate bathroom for those kids who are gender different, for identity, have gender differences, and that was just fine. And that, from what I hear, Jason, that is not fine. You cannot just provide them with a separate bathroom. If they choose not to go to that bathroom, they have the right to go to the other bathroom. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. And by the way, I hope you feel better. And for those who are curious, one of the bases of that comes from a Washington Administrative Code section adopted by the Human Rights Commission. And for those who don't know, our state Human Rights Commission is our state agency that's in charge of interpreting and applying our Washington law against discrimination. It's our state law that prohibits discrimination. And there is a WAC, and that the citation, if you want to look it up, is WAC 162-32-060. And that's one of,
excuse me,
162-32-060. And this is effectively one of the sources of where what's in the procedure regarding bathrooms, and sir, addressing the question you just asked, is that it is this regulation and interpretation of the law from the Human Rights Commission is that exactly what you just stated, that you cannot require students to use a gender neutral restroom.
and that's what I hear is a lot of people saying is the answer, and it's really not the answer.
I think it kind of comes back to the question that was asked earlier, is if all you had in your entire school was nothing but gender single stall restrooms, then that's what everyone would use. You're not requiring anybody to use anything. That's all there is. If you have boys restrooms and girls restrooms and separate gender neutral restrooms, that's where you're going to get into trouble under the law.
My second comment is, and I really appreciate some comments made by parents tonight. And I spent some time today with talking to Mark Strong. It's going to cost us some money to rearrange our bathrooms. And it sounds like the safe thing to do, the proper thing to do, is to put stalls in our bathrooms, boys and girls. And it's going to be some remodeling work, and it can be done. And it's done in other places. I remember Peter at the last meeting I was at over in the West Side, they have already started doing some of this work. It's not inventing anything at all. It looks like a very doable solution to this situation. Is there, Peter or Jason or whoever, has the state come back with any kind of funding to help school districts? I mean, there's 254 districts. who are having the same situation we have. Is the state providing any kind of financial support for us to help to do this extra remodeling?
I can take that. I can be the bad guy here. I'm not the state, by the way. The state has not provided funding specific to address this law, this policy, this procedure, no.
Thank you.
So just given what you just described here, it almost sounds like it's an all or nothing deal that we'd have to really look at if this problem were to go somehow, some way. My other concern would be, okay, just suppose, I'm not saying this is what we do, but just suppose we were able to come up with something where there are individual stalls in the restrooms. Could that be applied to showers as well, or does that have a different connotation to it?
I think locker rooms are treated differently. So that seems practically more difficult to address that particular issue. But again, the whole idea is that if you have gender-based facilities, then students get to use those. Again, as long as they're not abusing this, hasn't been found that they're abusing the policy or procedure, that students get to use those.
So just make sure I understand it. So if in the shower, they're all the same and they're all neutral, that you're saying it's an approach, or there's something different about that?
No, I think maybe I misunderstood your hypothetical, sir. If all you had were private showers, then that's all anybody ever could use, then you're not going to have a problem because there's no other options.
But they would all have to be single use to meet that.
Yeah, again, but probably would be something where we'd have to explore potential practical solutions to this that could address the concerns yet also comply with the law. I mean, the easy example on the one end of the spectrum is private single-use showers is all that you have.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that's feasible. I'm just, I'm solution oriented and I'm trying to figure out what are our options in terms of possibilities. Because any way we go, it's unpopular or one way and very expensive the other way. And where those funds come from is a challenge for us to figure out. But I need to figure out what possible solutions are out there that would work.
And it is very possible I don't have the answer to this as I stand here, but it's certainly possible that some other school districts in the area have come up with creative solutions that have attempted as best as possible to address all of the concerns here. And you did ask, I didn't quite answer your question earlier about all or nothing. And I would say at this stage, unless there's a change in the state law, yeah, there is not a whole lot of wiggle room for public entities.
If we were to have a restroom facility with single use bathroom stalls, and the supervision piece is by having cameras in that common area outside where they are washing, and somebody is monitoring that from a remote location. A staff member is monitoring from a remote location, not in person. Where are we at legal?
And by, just to be clear, like, I don't know, I don't spend a lot of time in schools these days. It's been a while for me. But you mean the place where they wash their hands outside of the confines
Correct.
of the restroom? Okay.
No, there would
Yeah.
not be a camera
That-
in
yeah, I
the
was gonna
single use
say
stall.
that-
No.
That changes the analysis.
Outside in the common area.
There's nothing wrong with the school district watching and supervising what's going on. That you have the right to just about anywhere within the confines of the schools to make sure that everything is going okay and that students aren't violating the rules. So just the practice of that is fine. I think the issue is going to be probably more just the application of it. What do you do if you see a student who appears to be a different gender walk into a bathroom, what do you do now? And that's probably the piece that would need to be thoughtful on how to handle that. But somebody supervising it or somebody just standing out there supervising it, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I'm sorry. This is not, you'll have a chance in the public discussion portion at the end of this. I have another question for you. So the possibility, I'm thinking in terms of where we can save money if something like this had to be done. There's a lot of urinals, for example, in the men's restroom. Could those be converted to single-use urinals? And would that still meet the definition of this requirement or this law?
Would it still be a male restroom?
Um,
I think if all you're doing is changing urinals to stalls.
Well, there's stalls in there as well.
Sure.
So literally, in my mind, I'm thinking if, that said urinal on it, obviously the opposite sex isn't going to the urinal, but there's also further down stalls that they could use that aren't labeled.
Sure. Yeah.
Would that work?
And that's a good question. And the reality is you can make whatever changes that you want to make structurally inside of the restroom itself. If you wanted to get rid of all of the urinals and put up stalls and just have every bathroom in your school and all of your schools just have stalls that close and lock, then you have every right to do that. There's no right to a urinal in a men's restroom, so you could change it if you wanted to.
So I think I'm not quite following. So just a simple question. If the urinal just had partitions and a door put on it that went floor to ceiling, essentially, it's converted to like a stall room. Would that meet that definition of individual usage? Even though, so somebody goes in there that shouldn't, is the opposite sex, couldn't use that and said, oh, this isn't the right one, I'm going to go out and use the other one. Are we violating anything by doing something like that? In my mind, that would save us a lot of money if we didn't have to convert all those to sit-down toilets, if some of them could be used or salvaged. Am I making sense with that?
Yeah, I think I'm understanding what you're saying. And I think you can make those changes all that you want. To me, it's going to be the question's going to become, what is that bathroom? What is that bathroom? Is it, I mean, you can.
That was, yeah.
Yeah, so you could just, if it's the boys' bathroom, it's still after you make the changes you're talking about, it's still his bathroom.
Well, that was the next part of my question. Then could we remove the signs if anybody could go in there? Would that have, I mean, is there any requirement that if we did something like that, now we have to change signs or anything like that?
No. No, all you have to do is if you have a boys' bathroom and you have a girls' bathroom, you have to let students use that based on their gender identity. If you turned every single, again, kind of back to our earlier hypothetical, if all the bathrooms were just, I know you're not talking about single use, you're talking about turning an existing structure of a boys' bathroom into all lockable doors.
Well, they'd all be single use, one person at a time could only go in there. And so I'm just trying to think out of the box a little bit here, if there's any other solutions. I don't know. This is a tough challenge for us. And so.
Mr. Strong, are you talking about the urinal still being out in the open or it being in a closed environment as well?
It would be in a closed environment. Well, it's the same as a toilet itself. It would simply be, you go in there, there's a urinal, so, okay, that's not for me, I'm gonna go to one that I can use. Maybe you could put on their urinal so that somebody coming to it would recognize it and say, okay, I'm not gonna use this one, but I don't know if that's meets the definition of the law that we're required to follow.
I think it all depends on how you're advertising the restroom. If it's still, and I apologize if I'm slow and having trouble tracking your hypothetical.
I think we're all there.
But I think it just depends on how are you treating that particular restroom that you're referring to? Do you walk in and it's labeled a boys' restroom and it's got a bunch of stalls in there, some with urinals and some with sit-down toilets? If that's the case, then you're going to have to let anyone who, pursuant to your policies and procedures, gender identity of boy gets to use that bathroom. They can't be compelled to go anywhere else. They get to use that restroom if they want. And you, by virtue of having those stalls there, you haven't changed anything. It's still it's still a boys' bathroom. You may have made it safer by having lockable stalls in all the restrooms. But in terms of the law, it really makes no difference. But what the important thing is going to be is how is that bathroom advertised?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I don't know how to ask this question tactfully. Boys will use the urinal out in the open. I guess if that were the case, that we would have a bank of urinal and we'd have a bank of sit down, boys may not shut the door. I think that there would have to be some rules and some guidance as far as getting all those things done if that were the case. So I don't know if, although it sounds like a good idea to be able to save money, I don't know if it would always happen the way that we would want it to happen.
One thing we've all learned, there's always some variation in
Right.
versus the intent. So,
Right.
Anybody else? Questions?
It sounds like to me that we're gonna stall up all of our bathrooms, toilets, and have individual stalls. That sounds, and have them safety locked. That sounds to make, I mean, that makes sense as part of this process. And I know you can't say yes or no, but I think that's just what and we heard that from the parents too. And it's not just safety, it's also just privacy. Yeah. So I think that's part of the expense we're going to go through. Does this need to be done in elementary, middle school, junior high, high school, at every school, or at just certain schools?
Mr. Jager, just for my clarification, are you talking about bathroom renovation every school, or is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if we're gonna, does this, I assume the rule applies, and I assume that we have kids at all levels, or could have kids at all levels. Do we need to, in the long run, look at doing this remodel of our bathrooms at all of our elementaries, middle level, junior high, along with high school? Jason, I'm asking you that.
I mean, from a legal perspective, all of the things we're talking about making alterations to the restrooms to make them safer or more private are not things that are addressed by the policy, procedure, or the law. You don't have to do any of those things. Those additional measures that school districts can take based on their assessment of what they need to do to make schools safer or more appropriate. All that the law requires is access to the restrooms.
Are we going to need to have all of our restrooms, kindergarten or K-5, middle level, junior high, high school, all of our levels are going to need to have all of our restrooms accessible to all kids, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there is nothing within the law that indicates grade levels. It's all facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, anybody?
Well, I don't have any questions, but
Comments?
I have some comments. And I think that I'd like to share with the board, and I'd like to share them with folks here in attendance and on Zoom tonight. And as an opening remark, I'd like to echo what has been said earlier tonight about the public comments that we've received. We greatly appreciate them. I greatly appreciate the manner with which the messages were delivered. It was delivered with respect. It was appropriate, and I greatly appreciate the tone directed at us. I think that my takeaway from those public comments is that you understand that we are in a difficult situation, which leads to my first comment. Mr. McKay starts out by quoting the Revised Code of Washington, which is law that was passed by the state legislature. That law, when you go look it up, and for those of you that don't know, I'm a lawyer too. I don't practice in this area, but I look at statutes every day. Unfortunately, or fortunately, being a lawyer is part of who I am. That's part of who you elected to sit on this board. I have to follow the law. This law was passed by the state legislature. That when you read this statute, there is no discretion afforded to the school district in whether or not we can or cannot pass a policy and develop procedures to deal with this law. We did not make that law. The state legislature did. And to address an earlier comment, yes, I have talked to State Representative Chris Corey on this particular issue and the challenges that are faced that you've heard from the board tonight and from our council about how do we implement this in compliance with the law. Number two, when you read the proposed policy and the procedures, it does not promote or endorse changing genders. Doesn't say that. It does not, this is not about, it simply says that schools can't discriminate against transgender students. That's what it says. And it's in furtherance of law that goes back even further than 2019, further than 2015, something called the Washington Law Against Discrimination, which was passed in the early 2000s. Number three, I hear you on the public comments, and I appreciate administration addressing because I brought it forth about including some language about genuineness and sincerity about a person's gender. This is not a free-for-all, and I'm very pleased to hear Dr. Finch talk about that effectively. This isn't a free-for-all. There's a process that needs to be followed, and so I'm glad to see that change. I can't assure you that that's going to make everybody feel better about it, but I do think that that was an important addition that I'm glad we were able to make. Number four, regardless of any policy that we pass, it is the paramount duty of any school district to ensure the safety of all students. It doesn't matter who you are. All students deserve to be free from bullying, harassment, intimidation, and any other improper conduct. And it's my expectation that if that is going on, whether it's inappropriate conduct or criminal activity that occurs on our school grounds, that we will take action to address that. And it doesn't matter what student you are and what you are or who you are. It doesn't matter. I'd like to talk next about moving to single-use bathrooms and some of the solutions that have been presented tonight. I think that those might be solutions, and I always appreciate whenever somebody comes to me as a school board member with a concern that they bring forward reasonable solutions that could work, and I try to also be solutions oriented as best as I can. This one has me, this whole situation has me confounded about what are reasonable solutions. It very well may be that single-use bathrooms are the solution. I would submit for the good of the order, however, that single-use bathrooms and just frankly bathrooms and in general and locker rooms in general, regardless of this issue, can be very dangerous locations. And not just for this situation, but just in general. I worry about, a single-use bathroom and a kid, any kid, taking another kid in there, locking the door, and they basically are going to, beat the what out of them. Is that a really good situation or not? I'm not here to debate that. That very well may be the direction that we go. But I do want to comment on something that I'm just speaking for Michael Thorner now. And I'm going to tell you what the starter. And that is the funding for this project. When we passed the bond associated with Apple Valley and Summit View, which took 3 times to do. A lot of effort went in and promises were made that we were going to build these schools and that's all that we were going to do. We built these schools for, we generated more funds than are needed. We're going to be talking about that upcoming. But for me, those funds need to be divested back to the taxpayers under all circumstances, regardless of any other needs that the district has, period. That is a non-starter for me. Finally, I think what you should be concerned about in this room is something that I'm concerned about, which is the erosion of local control that the legislature continues to impose upon local school districts. It's getting worse. In my time on the board, it's only getting worse. And I think I agree with the statement of what good is it to have a local school board and a school district if we don't have really much say. But with that said, the law is crystal clear on this particular topic. And I hope that we really focus, and the discussion of the school board has been really good. The law is what it is. And I look forward to coming up with good solutions that I'm sure everybody won't be happy with, but are going to do our level best to ensure the safety of all students in the district. So I'm going to stop talking. Thank you for everybody for hearing me in my comments. I don't want any applause, but people want to know where I stand. That's where I stand.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thorner. Well said. Couldn't agree more, particularly on one point about those funds being divested back to the community. I think most of us agree with that. If something were to happen in terms of single-use restrooms, we would have to consider other sources or figure out where that could come. But I agree with the money going back. I think most of us agree with that. So.
Well, that's for a future discussion.
Exactly.
And that's not tonight. And that's not tonight's discussion. I just want to make it really clear. And I know the individual board members know this. I just want to make it really clear. That's where I stand, because that's what we said we would do. And I don't feel like going back on our word on that.
I agree. So.
Can I comment? Is that possible for me today? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
There's a reason there's 5 of us on the board, so that you hear both sides of most opinions. And I think that we should look at the money that we've saved from those 2 buildings. I think it would be wrong to give the money back to the patrons and then in 2 years ask for it back again. I just don't think that makes any sense. And I think a lot of people would say, what are you doing? So I think we should look at that money that we save from those buildings and look at using it, part of it, if we don't know what this is going to cost, but this, and there's some other expenses that have been brought up that we have other expenses that we need to look at. And rather than give it back and then ask for it again, I think we should look at and ask the people, make sure we just don't tell them, but make sure it's a very open process, but explain to them what our situation is and what we need to do or we think we should do. Now, I know I'm in the minority on the board, but I think just the opposite of Mr. Thorner on this situation.
Okay, thanks, Dave, for your input. Anybody else?
And I just have one more. The initial sentence here says that a student may initiate a conversation, so forth and so on. School counselors are probably the most equipped to handle those situations. The teachers may be the teachers or the paraprofessionals, may be the trusted adults of those students, but they're not equipped to handle that situation. They're experts in their field. And so I don't know if that needs to be reworded or if that's part of the training that happens with our staff when a student does bring an issue to that trusted adult, that there is a plan on which professional this sits in front of.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and just one other point that I would want to make, and this is in response to both Mr. Thorner and Mr. Jager. You know, it's a difficult position to be in. On one side, Dave, you make some really good points about going back to the community in 2 years, and Mr. Thorner's point about keeping our word. You know, and I think if I have to put two of them side by side, my word comes first. I think we need to stick with what we said we were going to do. And not only that, you know, 2 years it can come by pretty quick. There's a lot of options that we have yet to explore in terms of where we could get money for something like this from. We need to go back to the state, first of all, and ask them how to implement this without funding us. I think that's an important, legitimate question to ask. Because it stymies us in terms of what our options are if we don't have the money to do it, or it's going to be astronomical and at the expense of what else? I mean, we've got buildings that have, you know, roofs that need to be repaired. There's other safety issues that we need to take care of in terms of security and cameras and all those things that are necessary to provide the safety of our students. So it's a tough choice. And I'm not saying we have to make it that way, but I would like to see us explore more options before we even consider or even talk about that, using that money. I think it needs to be back to the community first. If it comes down that way, I think that's the best thing to do, because our word is everything in terms of what we plan to do in the future.
I think though, if we wait 2 years, that's nearly 1,000 days where our community is upset that they're worried about their kids. Appreciate the applause. We're still having a conversation here. And like Mr. Jager says, we all have different points of view. But and I joined this board because I'm a kid person. I'm an educator. I am not the numbers guy. I am not the facilities guy. But if there's money left over from the bond and we have a bond oversight committee, and things change over 3 years, over 4 years, there's new direction that we need to take. This is the task in front of us. And if that's the best use of the bond oversight, I'm thinking that's what we should do with it. Although 2 weeks ago, we had a presentation for maintenance talking about all the money that they need for buildings and whatnot. But it sounds like this may be the most important at this point.
And just to be clear, Mr. Moquin, I'm not saying that it would necessarily take 2 years. I'm just thinking that dealing with the state is not a quick process.
And it's not just the state, but if we were to put it back to the community and the planning that needs to happen, if the bond passes, if it doesn't pass, we have to rerun. I just think somebody said, what do you do? I think Dave said from home, well, what are you people doing? So I just think there would be a lot of that said.
I have a question. I had this written down and I meant to ask it at the beginning before I was so excited to talk about my position. Dr. Finch, and maybe this is probably more directed at you and possibly Mr. McKay, but in the beginning of the procedure, it talks about the student initiating a conversation about their gender identity with any staff member. And you read through that, and I'm just wondering, where does the school personnel, the employees of the district, get the parents involved in that conversation? Because I don't see that here. I don't know if that's possible or not. I just don't know.
Well, as Jason had shared, the model policy has some additional language there, but bottom line is oftentimes these are, real delicate situations, and that basically we do talking here about having the parent involvement, but it is on when we talk about the requested name and such. We, have had situations in the past where we have not put that requested name into the Skyward system because the student has asked us not to do that because of difficulties at home with, the situation that they're dealing with. So it basically is really on a case-by-case basis because sometimes the students are having difficulty at home with the situation that they're in. And so we want to have it be a safe situation for the kid. But of course, we don't want to, have a situation where like it's in Skyward and the parent is not wanting that. And then that makes it real difficult for the child. So
I
mean,
think-
I had talked with Ben about the development of this procedure. And basically, we're trying to put in here how we're currently handling the situation because we are currently have students that are identifying, with a different gender than what they were born. Sometimes the situations are supported by the family. Sometimes it's not supported by the family. But the student actually does have rights themselves. They don't shed their rights at the school door. And so it's basically on a case-by-case basis, we have to deal with that. I guess that's why also, quite frankly, you see a cross-reference there. It's on suicide prevention. We got to be really careful in the situations that we're dealing with and deal with them on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Mr. McKay, I have another question. I'll change the topic just slightly here, and this is dealing with athletics. One of the parents raised a concern about the physical difference in strength and ability between males and females, and I agree with that. It's me that a male could be out there playing on a female's team, right? If I understand this correctly, they're physically stronger. They could hurt someone. Doesn't the state have an obligation to protect us there? I mean, it seems to me that by enforcing this, and that happens, if a male player playing on the opposite sex team were to injure another player, we would be potentially liable for something. Is that incorrect to interpret it that way?
That's not something I've specifically researched. I'm happy to do research for the board on that specific issue. My off-the-cuff response to the issue of liability is that generally speaking, when students play sports, there's some level of assumption of the risk that students undertake in playing sports activities. But I'm happy if you would like to research that specific issue. I mean, the reality of the current state of the law is that you cannot compel a student who is assigned as male to play sports with females in public sports in Washington State. But in terms of your question of liability, that's not something specifically looked into, but I'm happy to do so.
Okay, and the only reason I raise that is because if they can play on the opposite team, I just think the chances of physical injury is greater. And it seems to me that, I don't know if that, I get what the law says, but I don't know, do we have any options there in terms of saying something to the state about this? I mean, can we say something to them, write back to them and, express our concern over this particular area? I guess we could if we wanted to.
Yeah,
That's my own question.
I think the reality of the situation is, given the current state of the law, again, as Mr. Thorner discussed earlier, and I think I stated earlier, and we've been talking about, any changes to this are going to have to be driven by the state.
Yeah.
Because as of right now, again, and I think Mr. Thorner put it very well, there's not a whole lot of leeway for school districts, public entities under the law in Washington State as it currently stands. I, for one, I understand the point you're making about safety and sports.
Yeah, I guess I knew the answer to that when I asked it, but I do want to make a little bit of a distinction here because there are some sports that I think would apply equally. We just visited the JROTC, and to me, that's something that both sexes could probably do equally. But when you're talking about football or basketball, some physical sport, to me, there's a clear difference. And it seems to me that there should be some recourse that we could take, but I don't know what that is. And I guess, as Mr. Thorner said, and as you're saying as well, the law is very specific and very clear here on this issue, but to take a phrase from there somewhere back doesn't mean it's right, that it's out there. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents here. And thanks for, if you're willing to find out a little bit more about that.
I'm happy to look into that and advise the board.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? More comments? Any board members? More discussion? We done with this particular issue for at least for now? For today?
Well,
Mr.
I'll
Meyer?
talk to Mr. Strong in that, I agree with Mr. Thorner in that I'm going to comply with this law. That's our responsibility. But I'm going to do it, hopefully, in a way that meets the intent of the law and addresses the safety of our students, because I, like Mr. Mokel, am a student-oriented board member, have been since the beginning, and will continue to be so. I can sit up here and tell you that I agree with a lot of you. I really appreciate the way that you addressed us tonight as compared to our last experience. Will, as speaking just for myself, assure you that I will lobby and do my best to ensure the safety of each and every student in our schools, K-12. And that's point blank. And if we have to address funds that we may need to spend, that we have as a reserve from projects that you folks authorized, then I am going to lobby to put it before you to help us make that decision on if, when, and how much. Because if we rebate it, I guess, for lack of a better term, back to our taxpayers, not one of you sitting out there is going to notice a big difference in your taxes. It's a lot of money when you divide it up, but when you divide it up amongst the population of West Valley School District, it doesn't amount to a whole heck of a lot. With that, we have, I know, well, at least I can say we, because there's at least 2 of us that have contacted our representatives, state representatives and senators, but we're only 5 people, or 2 people in this case. And unfortunately, I have to put the onus on you. It's very imperative that our population and the constituents that we serve contact these legislators and apply pressure to them. We do it through our organizations, through WASDA and ASA and all the others, from the administrators and the school directors, but it's still a limited number of people without the help of our community. So I personally would urge each and every one of the folks sitting out here to contact your legislative representatives, state, local, and federal, and start lobbying for change in some of these things that we are pushed down on us that we don't agree with. So that's a respectful request and in response to some of the things that were said. So hopefully that puts some of your minds at rest and we can work together to work through this. And I have one question, Mr. McKay. When I read the policy, you've got in the procedures, you've got where the student can go and initiate a conversation. And then the staff member will assist the student to notify administration. And then yada, yada, the administration will talk to the student to see what their needs are, how their feelings are, respect gender, and their routine through the day, so as not to expose them to a lot of pain and those kind of things. But down in the very next paragraph, the school may not require the student to attend a meeting as condition of providing them with the protection to which they are entitled under this policy, procedures, and state and federal law. The first paragraphs and then the bullets. Explain you're directing the student to attend a meeting to go over those very things. And then the next one says you can't do it.
I think we could go through and clarify the intent of that. I think the intent of that is that they don't, I mean, the initial meeting is there has to be some sort of discussion, informal or otherwise, with a staff member to advise them of their designation. And then the idea being that it's best to have an administrator involved who is aware of the situation. I think if that student said, I don't want to talk to the administrator, and the staff member would go talk to the administrator, I think that's really what this is trying to address, that they can't be compelled to go into a meeting with a big authority figure like an administrator, like a principal or someone else, in order to get the protections under the law.
Right.
That said, I can see how reading through this, that's inconsistent, and we can easily make that adjustment.
Okay.
So I think that's really what that's trying to get to the bottom of, but I can see how it reads inconsistently.
Well, thank you. It's a pretty.
We can still
It is
adopt.
crystal clear, as
Right.
Mr. Thorner said.
Yeah, you can still adopt it on first reading, and then we can make those adjustments like Mr. Mokel and now Mr. Meyer had said. I can work with Jason to clarify those sentences between the first reading and second reading.
Yeah, I will.
All right, thank you. So if there are no more comments from the board on at least the item E1, gender inclusive schools, there are 3 items under that. Do we want to have any discussion on parent involvement or the civility policy as presented? Anyone?
Well, I'll just share that. So family involvement, we added, so that sentence reads that the board recognizes the diversity of family structures, circumstances, and cultural backgrounds, and respects families as important decision makers and primary stakeholders for their children's education. And again, as I said in my comments earlier, that we feel that bringing this into policy is actually more effective than because the policy will be referred to in the future. Next is the civility policy. This is in partnership with our Education Association. I had shared this, someone had asked me about this prior to the board meeting, and I had shared how, we had a teacher actually, someone was cussing at them on the phone, and then the teacher said, okay, well, I'm going to hang up now. And then they hung up, and then they were kind of questioning themselves, well, gosh, did I do the right thing there? And there was really no guidance actually in our policy or procedures, to say, we do expect civility, that a teacher does not have to take cussing at them on the phone, that's appropriate for them to end that conversation. And we wanted to make sure that all of our staff knew that we want to protect our staff against any type of uncivil conduct. And so we wanted to make a strong statement here about that it does have a civility policy. Again, I think I had shared in the notes to the board that this is a discretionary policy, but there are other districts that have similar. So we did look at them as different models, and we kind of took the best of all those different model policies that were out there. And we crafted something that we thought would work really well for West Valley. So that's how we came to the civility policy. And we definitely want to have our staff feel confident that they're going to be protected, and that they don't have to, take this uncivil behavior from people, and that, we do have expectations of civility here in our school district.
All right, thank you, Dr. Finch. With that being covered, would someone care to make a motion?
Let's take them one at a time.
You want to take them one at a time? All right.
I'll move to approve the first reading of 3211. Policy 3211, gender inclusive schools.
Okay, we have a motion, so we need to vote. Those in favor of 3211, gender inclusive policy, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion E1, gender inclusive schools.
Did we get a vote from Mr. Jager at home?
I didn't
Yes, you
hear an
did.
opposing vote.
I said aye.
Okay, thank you. So motion carries 5-0. Second item, 4129, parent involvement. Any further discussion on that, or if someone would care to make a motion, either way?
I want to talk about the term and primary stakeholders being added to this. Our children are our most precious they're most precious to us. If this is added, then please, my challenge to you as parents in our community is to be that. Make sure your kids get to school. We have students that are missing 20% of their school years. And they can't be educated, they cannot be on grade level, they cannot advance 1 year when they're absent. Go in and talk to your child's teacher and find out what's being taught in that class. I have a second grade teacher in my home and she talks about teaching IE blends before OO blends. I'm a PE teacher. I have no idea what that is. And I don't know what should be taught first or second or when. But if I'm that primary stakeholder, I need to get into her classroom and I need to ask her why. And then I need to be able to be at home and I need to be able to support her with my child so that my child can be successful. So where uncomfortable adding and primary stakeholders to it, I'm going to agree that it is in there, but my challenge is that parents become that primary stakeholder and get involved in that child's life. And with our district, those parents that are ill-equipped to become that primary stakeholder, we need to have something in place for those parents to be supported so that they know how to become that primary stakeholder.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Mokel. Any further discussion?
That was well said.
Any more? If not, would someone care to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve for first reading, policy 4129, parent involvement.
Okay, we have a motion. We'll go ahead and vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Jager. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 5015, civility policy, new policy. Is there any further discussion amongst the board members, or does someone want to make a motion?
I think that I'd just like to say again, to kind of repeat some earlier remarks that I had. When you read the civility policy, it was demonstrated in a positive way tonight. Thank you very much, everybody. That's excellent. I appreciate it. And I'll make a motion to approve the civility policy as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Thorner. We'll go ahead and vote. We have a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, moving on to discussion items. This is an opportunity again for, I'm sorry, I'm skipping number 9. Discussion items, budget development. So Dr. Finch.
All right, and I thank Mr. Strong, Mr. Thorner for your assistance on developing that civility policy. We're part of that work group, so I appreciate your work on that. All right, so between now and the adoption of the budget for the 2022-23 school year, I wanted to have each of our board meetings have a short update to the board on the budget development. And so at our last school board meeting, the administration shared the projected enrollment for the 22-23 school year, which is projected to be 4,932 students, or FTE, we call it full-time equivalent students. Now, we always start with enrollment because that's what drives our revenue. So tonight, we'll take a look at our revenue projections. Our finance department receives the revenue projections from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, that's OSPI. And our finance department has not received all projections, all programs at this time. We're still waiting for projections on federal funding, such as Title I and McKinney-Vento. McKinney-Vento is the program that serves students who are experiencing homelessness. We do anticipate an increase in federal funding, specifically for McKinney-Vento, I've been noticed that at the federal level, they had said that there was going to be an increase. And probably to respond to the increasing number of homeless students that we see across the nation. And certainly we appreciate all the work that our state and federal programs department, especially we've highlighted the RAM landing for our families and students that are experiencing homelessness. So we do anticipate an increase, but we don't know at this time what that increase will be. Our finance department has received projections for our basic education, career and technical education, and the state funds for special education. We see that basic ed and career and education are combined in the projection, and that we will receive additional funds for those combined basic ed and CTE. OSPI is projecting that we will receive about 500,000 additional funds for state special education. We'd like to provide a note regarding special education. 2 years ago, special education expenditures exceeded our revenue by over $1 million. And last year, special education expenditures exceeded revenue by about 700,000. So we do have a balanced budget, and we have to make up that difference with local funds. We won't know the final numbers on this year's budget until we close the books on this year's expenditures, and that happens in October. For our audience, the fiscal year for the school district runs September 1 through August 31st. So that's our school year for fiscal, September 1 through August 31st. So our finance department works on closing the books in September, and then we have an accurate description of the past school year in October. We're going to continue to work on getting projection for revenue, and then we need to look at our projection for expenditures. We know that our labor costs will be increasing in the upcoming school year. We are able to plan for this increase since we have multi-year contracts with each of our employee groups. So the finance department now is working to identify what discretionary funds we'll have available after we account for the increase of labor costs for the 22-23 school year. With those discretionary funds, we do anticipate we'll be able to increase some staffing. And so at our next board meeting, we'll have Assistant Superintendent Joe Conley share information with you regarding expenditures and specifically some planned additional staffing that we have for the 22-23 school year. So we're still working on getting the final projection for revenue, and then we will be sharing with you. We'll have another 2 weeks between now and the next board meeting, and that will give an opportunity for the finance department to work on that and to see what we'll have for discretionary funds. In addition to our budgeting and looking at the revenue projection, wanted to share information about the elementary and secondary emergency relief funds. So that is the acronym ESSER, but it's I like to call it just emergency relief funds. So these are federal funds that were provided for COVID and for what they call learning loss. For myself, I like to call it learning recovery or academic intervention. During the past school year, emergency funds were used for the following activities. We funded summer school. We funded paraeducator staff at each elementary school to assist with academic interventions. We funded targeted assistance for students before school at the elementary level. We funded certificated staff to assist with academic interventions at the secondary level. And then we had the costs that were associated with COVID, such as personal protective equipment and testing and COVID testing supplies and COVID testing staff. So we had quite a lot of expenditures due to direct expenditures for COVID. For the upcoming school year, we hope that we will not have to have expenditures directly to COVID, but we can use the funds for the academic assistance or academic intervention. Our plan for the 22-23 school year is to continue with the academic interventions that we've had during the past year, namely summer school, the paraeducator staff to assist with academic interventions at the elementary level, the targeted assistance before school at the elementary level, and certificated staff to assist with academic interventions at the secondary level. In addition, we know that students have been negatively impacted by COVID with their social and emotional support, and we've seen this across the nation, and we've seen it here in West Valley. We know that social and emotional foundations are essential for learning, and we're looking at using ESSER funds in the upcoming school year to provide some additional support at the elementary level. Again, as I said before, Joe can share more about the staffing plans for next year. He'll be presenting at our next meeting where we look at staffing. So far we've had enrollment projection, Then that relates to our revenue projection and use of ESSER funds. And then that leads to some additional staffing that we'll be able to take a look at. So we do have Joe is our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations. He's worked closely with Stacy Drake, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Teaching. They've been meeting with each principal throughout the spring, looking at what the needs are of the schools, and then looking at what we'll be able to put together for a plan on the additional staffing because we will have some additional revenue as we look at our plans for next year. So that's an update on the budget development. And Joe was not able to be here this evening, so I was doing my best to talk about the finance side of the house, but he keeps me well informed, so I appreciate that. We do want to have a public comment section as well for the use of ESSER fund. That is part of, as you look at the requirements for the use of the emergency relief, is to have an opportunity for public comment. So I wanted to make sure that we provided that here in the board meeting and that we would have that in our minutes as well, that there was this opportunity for comment on the use of ESSER funds. Thank you. And if there's any questions, we certainly can have discussion at this time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Finch. So again, this is another area where we can take public comments from the audience here and also anyone that might be joining us via Zoom. So public comments on discussion items. I don't think we have a list for that, so we'll just ask if you do, if you could come up to the podium, up to the mic, and so everybody can hear you.
Yes, I apologize for not signing up earlier. I didn't think I was going to speak. My name's Kristen Kangas. We're actually new to West Valley. I'm also a teacher. This is my 24th year of teaching. Couple things. I get RCWs. I get the wax. I get your hands being tied. Unfortunately, we also have people that are making these laws that have not a clue about school, not a clue about our students, the day-to-day operations of school. So reaching out to them, like they've said, is really important to share your concerns, your thoughts with them, because they are sitting on Capitol Hill making decisions for your students. They have no clue what's going on. One question I do have, and that's why I asked for clarification on the new bullet, is the documentation of the student's genuine and sincere declaration. To me, that's still really subjective. So my question is, and we've heard this many times this evening, a student sharing what their gender identity is going to be, how often can that change? So is it a form they're going to fill out with the administrator, and then the next week it can change? Genuine and sincere declaration. What does that mean? I still don't understand what that means, I guess. To me, sincere and genuine be something very different from somebody else. The other thing I wanted to point out real quick, just something to think about. We heard from a young lady this evening who shared her concern and the fact that this makes her so uncomfortable. A lot of our students, and I teach that level, do not have a voice. They don't know how to share their concerns, their feelings of being unsafe and uncomfortable. And so they act out with behaviors because they don't know how to communicate that. So yes, it's the parents' responsibility to talk to their students about these things. But I also think, especially maybe at a high school level, just another question, how much is this being shared with the students? Because I found out via text from my student about this policy and like rumors started flying. So I think students communicated that on exactly what this is. It's a freaking out, families are freaking. So, one more thing. Yeah, instead of an internal. After the share a bathroom with someone of the opposite gender, it can bring up a lot of mystery and trauma. That's just not fair. It's me to go to school and feel safe and feel secure. This is just one more way that can be.
Right. Thank you. Your time is up. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask, is there a Zoom comment as well? Okay. Go ahead and speak if you're on Zoom. Please be sure that your device is unmuted so we can hear you.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. This is State Representative Chris Corey. I apologize for not being there this evening. Wife is out of town on work and had trouble getting a babysitter for the time, but I'm glad I was able to participate via Zoom. First of all, I want to thank the parents who've come tonight expressing concern. I think they've brought some valid concerns and are working to try to address those in the policy. And I really want to thank the school board for acknowledging those. And I think, you know, I'm. Uh-oh.
Did we lose you there, Chris? Okay.
I have another, you have a comment here. We
Yeah,
can
I was-
wait for Chris.
Yeah, if we have another person, we'll go ahead and take your comment and hopefully we'll get Representative Corey back on the line. Sure, but I'm going to take them in alternating order, so, okay. Go ahead. 3 minutes.
Go.
Go ahead.
One thing I think that's concerning to me, I think it was Mr. Thorner that also said this, that nothing in this first part says anything about the parents' involvement, right? The kids are still under 18. They are still living in our houses. Why does the school get to decide if that information should be shared with me? So let's say my kid comes to you, you decide that I'm not supposed to be involved, and then my child commits suicide. So you decided that you thought you were keeping my child safe by not telling me. Why do you get to decide if it's safe for you to tell me? If a kid comes to you with any of this, there should be something in here that says that the parents are going to be made aware. The school can work with the parents, that's fine. The parents are made aware that this is going on. The other question that I had is in the second page of the confidential health and education information, you know, it says that the school can't tell everybody what the gender status is. So if a kid is going to school, a girl, a daughter, my daughter, and she is in the bathroom and a boy comes in and is going to the bathroom with her and she is confused and wanting to know what's going on. And I come to the school and say, is this boy that's in the bathroom with her who is bothering her, has he identified as being, you know, has he given a declaration? If you can't tell me that, how am I supposed to tell my daughter that that person was supposed to be in the bathroom? she doesn't get to know that. I mean, you added that they're making a declaration, but if they're making a declaration and nobody's allowed to know about that declaration, how is a female supposed to feel safe or know? Like, is she able to question who's in the bathroom? If she's uncomfortable, is she able to come to you and question who is in the bathroom with her? And then you're not allowed to tell her that that person was there. It just seems like there's only one answer. That one answer is to do single stall bathrooms so everybody is comfortable. And I'm a taxpayer. I want to see that done. And if it's not going to be done, then I'm not going to vote for another levy if you're not going to put the money towards making sure every single kid is safe and feels comfortable.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. Let's see if we have Mr. Corey back on the line. He's back. Okay. Chris, can you hear us?
I'm back. I don't know exactly where I got cut off. I'm sure it was probably in one of my finer points that I was making, but I'll try to be brief here. I appreciate the flexibility. Sorry about that. The parents are right to be concerned about the safety of their kids. The school board is right to be concerned about complying with the law. The comments that were made by various people about just how little local authority we have left is correct. I've spoken with multiple board members and parents. I'm committed to working through and proposing legislation that reverses this. I think that there's no reason why a local school board should have to act under threat of funds being cut off. I think that's not fair to our school board. It's not fair to our parents. It's not fair to our students. I think you guys are doing the best you can with what you've got going on here. And based on the questions you were asking, it's clear you're listening to parents. I think we've got more we can do. I know I'm committed both as a resident of West Valley as well as a state legislator to address those. I think when it comes to the funding issue, you're right. We continually add unfunded mandates, and there should be additional funds in there to help comply with this law. I'm going to work to hopefully overturn that, but in the case that we are trying to keep our kids safe and comply with this law, I think the single-use bathrooms is a thing the state should be helping fund. So I appreciate the parents for the civility tonight. I think it's very frustrating and concerning. As a father of both, boys and girls, I'm with you. So I'm hopeful that we can keep revising this policy and working to make sure it is as narrowly crafted as possible to comply with the law, but at the foremost, protecting the students in our district. So thank you all.
Thank you for your comments. I thought there was a student who wanted to say something. Would you please step up to the podium?
Hello, everyone. I am a current freshman at West Valley High School. And as a student that was born from a mother who was in school, she was 16, her teacher had to report her. Teachers are state reporters, right? And a current teacher of mine, my math teacher, Mr. Cooper, has said he had a student that was pregnant when he was teaching however many years ago. And he had to report her to her family, to the principal, I think too. Now, if the parents cannot know what happens, there's different styles of that we have in our world. And if the parents don't know, that can cause major miscommunication in families, and that can be indefinite to their relationship as a mother with a daughter, a father to a son, and vice versa. And then students will have outrage across our school for sure. I've seen our students act, and how we act is very childish sometimes. We are, of course, still kids. We are under the age of 18. And to be forced to do what the school committee is suggesting will, of course, have some people upset. And with these kids, of course, there's going to be bullying, discrimination across our school. What is going to stop these kids from doing it? Even though they might get in trouble, some of these kids will not care. They will continue to do that. And then religion plays a big factor into this. For me, we are Christian and our belief plays a big part in this. How will the school board look at religion? And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you as well for your comments. Do we have anybody else via Zoom? We got one more, okay. We'll go ahead and take the next Zoom person. Please, again, unmute your device so that we can hear you.
So I just wanted to follow up with my previous comment from earlier about doing the all-inclusive bathrooms with the single-use stalls. I know that I very much respect the opinions that were shared from the board members about wanting to stay true to their word and where that money was being spent. And so I commend your being true to your word. As a taxpayer, community member, and a parent of 6 kids in the district, I can tell you that I will be the first on the list of a petition that will say my vote as a community member is to have that funding to go back to making these single-use bathrooms a possibility. So I will be creating a petition, I guess, if that's what we need to do in order to convince those of you on the board who want to make sure that you're doing what the community wants. Then we will make sure that we let that be known loud and clear, and that we will not be holding you saying, we won't come back and say, well, you didn't hold true to your word. We would come back and say, thank you for listening to the community and knowing that this is that important to us. And that's where we want to see our funding going. I also wonder, as you mentioned with the ESSER funding, maybe we need to say that this is a state of emergency. This is something that is an immediate concern. It is a daily concern. It's a concern tomorrow. It's a concern yesterday and the beginning of the year. And as long as it's a concern, maybe that can qualify. Maybe that can go under the statute of being something that's a state of emergency and can qualify to be, we can use some of those ESSER funds for this. I don't know. I don't know how how that works, but I believe that there are enough community members that would back using the excess funding from those elementary schools to go towards making this happen as quickly as possible. And I know that it requires a lot. I've done the research. I know how much it costs to make these single-use bathrooms work. And as much as I am a proponent of trying to do things on a budget-friendly and save costs, I also recognize the importance of doing it right and making sure that doing it right involves the safety of every student. And I appreciate so much the discussion that we were able to be a part of from the board, asking questions of our legal representative. And so thank you for asking those questions and letting us see what where you stand and what you're trying to figure out. And I totally respect trying to find a less expensive way to make it happen. However, under the circumstances with the research that's out there, there's a really good support and evidence of how it's working in other districts throughout the area, in the Portland area, in St. Paul, Minnesota. We can see evidence, we can see the studies and the research and everything that supports it being done the right way. And there's ways that schools are making locker rooms more used and all inclusive. So we have options, there are solutions. And I think that if this funding becomes available and we have it, I think that you will have the community backing you up to use it to make this happen as quickly as possible so that we can ensure the safety of our students as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for comments. Okay, we have some people in the audience that would like to speak. So I guess you're lined up in order. So if you'd step up to the podium, please.
So Don Kirby again, spoke earlier. Just clarification, Dr. Finch, that you had mentioned that you were really unaware and the school board was unaware this policy has been in the law since 2020. Is that correct? Am I to understand that every one of the board members were not aware of this RCW, this mandate that was enacted in 2020? Is that right?
Yeah, that's.
Is that correct?
I'd answer that previously.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd
Yeah,
like,
that's what I shared
I'd
previously.
like a response on that.
Yeah.
Secondly, you mentioned, Mark, regarding the, I think I understood you to say simply just making the restrooms, if you will, compliant with, single stalls or whatever, maybe using the existing restrooms, or is that what I heard? Here's where I'm going with it. If you look at, you get into simply changing the stalls out or the urinals out or whatever, you're probably going to run into a lot more issues with ADA and also issues with how many fixtures, those are all based on student counts. So it's more than just simply going to be changing the existing facilities that you have. It's a big deal. So I wanted the board to be aware of that. And thirdly, the issue of the funds. Am I understanding from Apple Valley and Summit View, there's about a $6 million balance left there? Does that sound right?
No, it's more than that.
It's more than that. Okay. So I was just curious to that as far as the usage.
We will be presenting on that later.
Okay.
It's, but it's more than that.
Okay, all right. Well, the reason I ask is I saw the CM report that's publicized, and I think it was on that. And then with regard to the ESSER funds, ESSER 3, I think it's three parts, right? ESSER 1, 2, and 3. Is ESSER 2 any ability there to take ESSER 2 funds? I know ESSER 3 is totally dedicated to students and all of that, but ESSER 2, I think, has got some capital element in it. I think. I may be wrong in that, but I see a lot of school districts that are using these to develop tracks and additional classrooms and everything else. So those are my comments.
Thank you for your comments and considerable input. All right, I believe, is there anyone else via Zoom? We have more. Okay. Again, I'm going to start because it's starting to get late. I would like to remind everyone, please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes so that others can talk. I'd like to hear from, or we would like to hear from as many people as we can, but we want to be cognizant of how much time individually you're taking. So with that, let's go to the next person via Zoom. And again, would you unmute your, so we can hear you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Megan Mock again. I'm calling, or I just wanted to comment a little bit on each of the policies. I appreciate the parent being primary stakeholder addition to the one policy, and I think if you put it there, informing parents about the genuine expression of gender change needs to have parent notification there. You can't have one without the other. And then I do also want clarification on who then you can tell, because there was discussion about supervision and making sure those that have given genuine concern or genuine change of gender expression are the ones that can use the bathroom. Then teachers need to know. Finally, on the civility policy, I'm hoping that you hold students accountable, because it kind of sounds like there's some issues with student civility in the building. And I hope that those kids are held accountable to civility in addition to parents. And then just to reiterate my comment from before, clearly the state has completely departed from reality, whereas bathrooms have always been divided by biological sex, not gender identity. And bathrooms and sports are divided by biological sex, hence urinals. So, you know, we've departed from reality, and I appreciate Mr. Thorner's recognition of the loss of local control and Mr. Meyer's plea to reach out to our lawmakers. But I again want to just say teachers need to leave the WEA. That is a huge funder of all these very leftist ideologies and all the things that are causing trouble in our school districts are getting pushed from the WEA. Teachers who don't support them need to leave. There are better options. optouttoday.com. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. We'll go on to the next person in line.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, just like my friend over there who just spoke, I'm a current freshman here at West Valley High School. I'm also a cadet in the JROTC program. Like the board member saw earlier, I'm on the rifle team. And I just like to point out a few things. So I have 2 points and a comment. I'll go into the points first. Number one, yes, this may sound subjective, but I'm sure a lot of you here can agree with me. I believe it is kind of disgusting to have somebody of the opposite gender there in the same bathroom with me. And I mean, yeah, sure. From what you hear most of the time, it is, you know, it's boys in the girls' bathroom is disgusting, but it goes the other way too, folks. It's disgusting to have a girl in the bathroom with me. The second point is I have to ask, when is it going to be enough? So we're putting this action in, and I have to ask, why is it this year? And I mean, I know this is my first year here at this school, and it's actually been a great experience. So thank you. But why now? Why are we all of a sudden trying to put these policies in place when it could have been done years ago, or it could have been done years from now? Like, I don't understand the point of why it's all of a sudden being done. And also, when is it going to be enough? So we have these policies going in, but then like we're going to have people complaining about we're going to need litter boxes in the bathroom for furries. Like, I'm sorry. I know that may sound gross, but I have to point it out. And so like to me, it just sounds like it's never going to be enough. So, and then here's my last point, and it's a comment. Mr. McMurray here said earlier, we here at West Valley, we like to make sure every single student in the school district, their voice is heard and their voice is safe. But like one of you, I apologize, I don't remember your name earlier. I believe it was you, actually, the second person that spoke. You said that why should we sacrifice the majority for the minority when the majority is just that, the majority? So I understand we need to take sides from all students, but at the same time, why should we sacrifice, the majority for the minority? So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate it when the students feel brave enough to speak up. So thank you for speaking up. Anybody else via the comment? We do have more. Okay, let's go to the next. No. Okay, we'll move on to someone in person here. So Mr. Marinacci.
Hey, just a couple points. Since obviously one board member misunderstood what I said, there could be other people in the audience who understood what I said. I did not say the policy said such and such and such and such. What I said was, and I'll read it again, another suggestion for the gender policy is to include a provision that no school district employee shall actively influence, encourage a student, so forth and so on. So to be clear, I didn't say it was in the policy, but I'm recommending it's good guidance for the staff to not go down that path. Okay, hopefully it's understood. Next thing is lots of good discussion about the excess money related to the two schools. Chair of the Bond Oversight Committee, one of the recommendations which could reconcile, Mr. Thorne made a point, there was a promise that was made out there. We're going to just spend on these two schools, no more. And now we've got the situation that's occurring, and Tim Critchlow also has a number of items that are out there. How do we deal with it? Well, maybe the way to reconcile it, rather than the board being forced to make the decision, they put it to the people. The Bond Oversight Committee is recommending that whatever's left over excess, a certain amount, the excess, option A could be all the money goes back to the people. Option B could be you split it. Maybe half goes back to the people in form of a rebate. The other half could go to a list of approved CapEx items, which could include a gender inclusive bathroom with lockable doors. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Marinacci. Again, I will check to see if there's any additional comments via Zoom. No? All right, next, Mrs. Borden, would you like to come up to the podium?
I wasn't going to speak, but since the rest of my family have, I thought I better stand up here. My main concern, we have a lot of conversation about the high school and the middle school, but my big concern is elementary school. So like my children and my grandchildren who are raised that we are created male and female, and that they should have, they should be covered. They should, be raised conservatively. They shouldn't be racy, all that other stuff. And so then we have our elementary kids at school, let's say a second grader that's using a bathroom and a fifth grader boy comes in. We don't have to have curriculum for gender identity. That is gender identity right there. Because if it's my granddaughter who's raised that God created male and female, and she is going in the bathroom with somebody who's the opposite sex, and she was told as a child not to do that, that starts the discussion already. I have one question. If we knew this was coming down the pike, why wasn't Summit View and our Apple Valley schools made just with gender inclusive bathrooms? You all knew this was coming on the board. You all knew about this law a long time ago. We could have saved thousands and thousands of dollars if you would have done that. And lastly, Mr. Thorner, who I really do enjoy, but you made a comment that law, it is what it is. Well, guess what? In the South, it was a law that Black people sat in the back of the bus. It was a law that Black people couldn't drink out of a drinking fountain. And it took courageous people to stand up, because just because it's a law, it's not right. I'll tell you how to get money and I'll tell you how to get elected. If within the next couple of months, there was an article in the paper in the state of Washington and national news that the board members of West Valley School District challenged our state on this law, we'd have all the money you need.
Thank you very much for your comment. Is there any more? I'll take one last one via Zoom, a stab at it. No Zoom comments, and we have no more standing in line. Again, I want to echo something that was said earlier. I really appreciate all of us do, the respectful tone and the input from all of you. And to me, it's also a recognition that all of us, we are in this together. I mean, we have to work together to figure this out. This is not an easy challenge by some of the comments that all of you have heard, just as we have. This is going to be something that takes all of our effort, all of our energy to resolve as a team, because we're all the West Valley School District. So thank you for being here and contributing tonight. I wanted to say that before we get down to the adjournment, because folks have a tendency to kind of start leaving at that point. Going on to item 11 on the agenda, items arising. Does anyone have anything? Before you take off, I want to say thank you to our legal counsel, Jason McKay, for being here tonight. I know it was you came from Spokane, I understand, right? So long trip. Thank you for and answering questions and putting up with our barrage of questions as well. So thank you. Safe trip. All right, there are no more items arising. We'll go on to item 12, Superintendent's Report.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight in my written report, I had shared with the board that there were over 144 participants in the Dollars for Scholars fundraiser, and just appreciate all the volunteers that helped to put that together and all the participants in the fundraiser. The evening event will be on the night of our next board meeting, so we will not be able to attend the night where they give out the scholarships, but certainly appreciate Dollars for Scholars and all they do for our students.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Finch. Anything else from any other board members? All right, board reports, board development. Anybody?
Just want to comment on tonight's meeting. When I was appointed to the board in August, I had knowledge on what was going to face me over the next 9 months. My first 2 or 3 board meetings, we sat in the library, and there were some very passionate people that stepped up to the microphone, challenged us. We were called names, and that's just part of the deal. Coming into tonight's meeting, I had the same fears that was going to happen when we walked into the room tonight. This is a 3-hour meeting, and this has been the best board meeting that I've been to in my 9 months. The communication that we have gotten from you during public comment, from those people that are calling in from home, the discussion that we've had on the board, the addition of our attorney being able to enlighten us on aspects. We have experts in our room in architecture that can speak to possible modifications that need to be made. This is what I hoped a board meeting would be about when I joined the board. And just as the other board members have said, thank you for doing this good tonight. I appreciate it as well. Civility Policy was on this for a reason tonight, and I think that everybody's followed it, and I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mokel. Anybody else? All right, hearing no more comments, we will go ahead and adjourn. It's 10:02 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for participating this evening. Hopefully, we'll see you in a couple of weeks at our next meeting.